Right. Hi, everyone. This is Alexander Lim, and welcome to AuthorStory. On this episode, I'll be speaking with Jennifer Ann Moses, whose latest novel is The Book of Joshua, and you can check it out right now by clicking on the Amazon link in the video description below. As for Jennifer herself, well, actually, this is not her first novel. She's a writer. She's written several books before, and this one's a pretty interesting novel to write about. So, Jennifer, welcome. It's great to have you with us on Author Story.
Thank you very much.
All right. So, Jennifer, you've written quite a few books. What was your inspiration for writing the Book of Joshua?
That is a question people ask.
All right.
And there's never, it's the hardest question for me to ask for all of my books, including this one, because I never have one inspiration. But I will say that I'm a storyteller.
Mm,
I see been born sort of almost like my brain is a sponge and it's just catching the stories out there, and some of them resonate and some of them don't. But
right.
there is a real story behind the germ, the seed of the novel that is the Book of Joshua was based on a real story. A friend of mine of my youth, my very first boyfriend when I was summer romance when I was 16 years old, I had my first romance with a lovely young man named Danny. And we had our summer romance and we went our separate ways and we became friends and we both ended up in college on the East Coast. The real Danny was from Los Angeles and I grew up in Virginia. So we didn't live anywhere near each other. But when we both found ourselves on the East Coast in college, we established a friendship. And during those years, Danny, who was gorgeous, handsome, who was sunny, who was from a very wealthy family, who went to Princeton, no less, and who was sort of slated, he was sort of the golden boy. He was slated for a kind of dazzling success, as if it were in his gene pool, became increasingly paranoid and miserable and angry and just desperately weird. And during those years, he kind of stalked me, not in a scary way. He had a strange fascination with me, which I didn't know what to do with.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time with him having kind of what my mother used to call heavy, deep, and real conversations,
Right.
which
Right.
were sort of typical of that age, but also there was a dark, kind of creepy side to it, emotionally. I don't mean like in a scary movie. Well, anyway, during those years, he had a schizophrenic break, and in his
Uh-huh.
case, nobody knew what was going on with him.
Uh-huh.
People didn't recognize it for what it was. I certainly didn't.
Right.
But his parents, who were desperate to get him help, couldn't figure it out. All
Right.
the doctors in the world weren't able to spot it.
Uh-huh.
Well, he was heading for a giant schizophrenic break, which happened in his case. He was at Princeton. He was an undergrad. He went to New York, I guess, for the weekend or
Uh-huh.
spring break. I don't know what. He was staying at a YMCA.
Right.
And during that time, he committed what he later called a blood sacrifice. And
Uh-huh.
he put his own eye out with,
Ouch.
yeah, I don't know. I really never knew the story firsthand.
Uh-huh.
So even then, when it happened, I wouldn't have been able to verify the details as I knew them. But my understanding was he poked his own eye out with maybe the bedstand, maybe
Uh-huh.
with I don't know what the implement was,
Right.
and he survived his wounds. And in fact, he ended up graduating from Princeton, although it may have taken him 5 or 6 years rather than the standard 4.
Right.
And he went on to have a life, to get some kind of help, medication. I don't know what. By this time, I was getting married and having babies and moving around the country myself with
Right.
my husband.
Right.
And I kind of wasn't thinking much about my friend Danny. But my mother and Danny's mother were friends through the world of American Jewish philanthropy. They went to rubber chicken dinners together and gave a lot of money to whatever the cause was. And my mother called me. I'll never forget it. I was 36 years old. I had I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It was a million degrees outside. I had 2-year-old twins,
Mm-hmm.
and my oldest son Sam was 6 and was and still at almost 30, some kind of hyper guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Mom said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Yes." "What, Mom?"
Mm-hmm.
She said, "Danny, Danny lit himself, doused himself with gasoline and lit himself on fire
Whoa.
in front of his parents' home in Los Angeles." And
Right.
this story just kind of, maybe because my relationship with the real Danny happened when I was so young, and it was my first love. He was
Right.
16. It was so exciting. We were so
Right.
cute. All that.
Right.
Maybe because I was so young, it just, the real Danny story just kind of entered me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the story, the story, it just almost haunted me. And in the meantime, for all those years after Danny's death, Danny's mother called me in Baton Rouge every year on Danny's birthday, every year just to talk. And I think it was because I always speculated that that was because I had known Danny when, before he was ill. And because my mother and Danny's mother were such good friends, I had kind of almost like I was a niece almost to her.
Right.
I was in a different category.
Right.
Um, and I was always so moved. I was so moved and so what's the word? I felt so privileged to have been kind of chosen by her to be the recipient of whatever it was she needed, whatever connection it was she hoped to get from me, and maybe did get from me because she continued to call every year. She died years later of cancer,
Mm-hmm.
but by then she was kind of old enough to die without it being a tragedy, if
Right.
you will.
Right.
Um, so that was the real story,
Okay.
and
Okay.
but the book I wrote is not that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
That that was the kind of guts, the stuff that was in my guts
Right.
that eventually turned into the book of Joshua.
Right. Okay. Well, let me talk a little bit about some. Let, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the characters in the book, like Joshua. I mean, he's the main character.
Right,
Stories told from his perspective. How
right.
much of you meant because you spoke of Danny already? How much of Joshua is Danny?
Not much,
Not much.
but
Okay.
what they have in common is that they both have the star quality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, that was the seed of it. That my Joshua has his schizophrenic break
Mm-hmm.
when he's 18.
Right.
Uh, the real Danny was more like 20 or 21, but those are the typical ages for the
Right.
schizophrenic break, as I've come to understand,
Mm-hmm.
to the degree I understand any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but so Joshua has this star quality, and also he has this fascination to the point of kind of stalking
Mm-hmm.
with the girl who's presented as his girlfriend,
Right.
Sophie,
Right.
in the book. Only Sophie's disappeared,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I disappeared myself from Danny's trajectory at a certain point because he gotten, as I said, kind of emotionally creepy for me.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that. That's the main point of connection between the character Joshua and the real Danny. Um, but I wanted to give my Joshua hope,
Mm-hmm.
lots of
Right.
it.
Right.
And Joshua's actually much more me than he is Danny, and not in any of his externals, because Joshua, when we meet him, as you know, he's just woken up in a hospital bed,
Right.
minus one eye, and he doesn't know how he got into the hospital, why he's
Right.
in the hospital,
Right.
what happened to his eye, and
Yeah.
most of all, he wants to know where Sophie is. Where's
Right.
Sophie? He keeps
Right.
asking through the book, what happened to Sophie? Did I
Right.
kill Sophie? Where's Sophie? I love Sophie.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
not meant to be together, and all of that.
Yeah.
And his parents won't tell him, and his brother won't tell him, and he doesn't know what he himself did or who he is. He doesn't know who he is anymore.
Right.
He doesn't know who he is. And that was my struggle. And I think to a large extent, the struggle for all adolescents. Who are you? It was my struggle, sort of maybe more than the typical kid, because I came from a very difficult family
Right.
and was told I was X. My whole life, I was told I was X, and I wasn't X at all. And it took me until I was like, when I was my own child, I had an empty nest. My own three children were grown by the time I really understood that what I had been what I was convinced my story wasn't my story at all.
Right. Okay. All right. So,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Got that. Okay, cool. So, I find it interesting about the tension and the dynamic that comes to Joshua's family.
Hmm.
As you mentioned, he does have a schizophrenic break. So, for me, it's a reminder that mental illness isn't just about the person concerned. Everyone is affected by it, especially the family members whom they're close to.
Well, that's 100 million% on target. It's illness. The way I think of mental illness, and thank God it has never touched me or my loved ones in this kind of profound way. But the way I think of it is, it's like a cancer of the soul. You know, cancer. I myself am a cancer survivor. I'm absolutely fine. It's been almost 20 years since I had cancer, but cancer afflicts your body. It
All
it
right.
it might kill you, but it leaves you intact.
Mhm,
You're still there.
mhm.
And my mother died of cancer many years ago. Up until she was unconscious, which was less than 12 hours before her death,
Mhm,
she was still there.
mhm.
She was there, and in all her kookiness, which is who she had always been.
Right.
And but mental illness, it sort of destroys you from the inside out in a way I can't even begin to fathom the misery of that kind of struggle. And addiction, by the way, does do the same thing. I don't know if addiction is a mental illness per se. And again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not any kind of scientist, I'm a writer. Um, but I have had a lot of addiction in my world up close and personal, and it is a soul destroyer, and it pulls the entire family down with it. It makes everyone cuckoo, absolute cuckoo crazy. So,
Right. Right.
and it's often somehow right in front of you and invisible at the same time.
Right. And I find particularly interesting, I mean, the way the impact and the way the family members react to Joshua's condition. I mean, like the dad wants to ignore it. The mother, she's seen it before, something like this before in her previous work with children. And
Right,
Joshua's younger brother, he's resentful about the lack of freedom and keeping
right.
secrets and
So,
all that.
right.
It's heavy stuff.
Well, secrets, there's a cliche which is your secrets keep you sick.
Hmm.
Secrets keep you sick.
Hmm.
I'm a firm believer in that saying. It's sort of like you have to, if you have secrets, you have to lance the wound. You have to let it breathe. You have to let
Right.
it all out.
Yeah.
Um, and so, right, so Josh's little brother has been corralled, forced into keeping the secret. He doesn't even know. He doesn't know the full extent of what actually happened with his brother because his parents haven't told him either.
Hmm.
But he does know that there's this big giant secret, and um, that he's been forced into making a deal, into making a contract and a promise that he will keep the secret, that he will not open the doors of the home to fresh air and light, the light of truth. And it's making him sick and mean too. He's the one who finally like loses it, and the little brother is just furious. He's pissed off. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to, you know, and he's the one who has that healthy impulse, that healthy male adolescent impulse to break open the doors. Um, Even though he's shown as the beginning of the book as this like really jerky, kind of infantile, selfish little brother. In fact, he's just pissed off.
Yeah.
He's pissed off. Enough. He's like enough. Um, but it's really in the end Josh's struggle. Josh is the one who, as you know, he's the one who has to figure out what the bad word, I can't say it on the radio.
Right.
What the blankety blank
Yeah.
Has he been up? Who is he? What has he done?
Yeah.
What is he wants the rights to his own story.
Yeah.
He's passionate that he wants to be the author of his own story. And that's his struggle. And then, as you know, he gets a lucky break. He has to, because he's had a schizophrenic break during his last year of high school, and he'd been this big track star and Mr. Popular and gorgeous and good grades and the whole bit. He has to repeat his senior year of high school. He goes back home after the hospital to northern New Jersey, to a town very much like the one I live in, and he's incredibly miserable. And now he's in classes with his own little brother.
Right.
And he's fat on top of everything else. This great athlete is now fat and kind of, has acne, and he's just gross in every way. And he's numb, and he's dumbed down, and he's incredibly depressed. And there's another newcomer to the senior class. And she's this scrappy little weird girl. She's weird looking, and she's tiny, and she's mouse-like, and she has a scar on her forehead, and she's really weird. And he thinks she's kind of stalking him, and thinks they both think they're stalking each other,
Right.
in some weird way, and they both sort of can't stand each other. And then through a series of high school events, they're forced to talk to each other as human beings. And in that way, the seed of their friendship is planted, and her name is Elizabeth, and Elizabeth has her own secrets, but she keeps them from other people, not from herself. So she is the compelling, loving friend. There's no romance between them, who gives Josh finally the courage and the permission to figure it out. And so, and I wanted to explore that real friendship, that deep bond that young people at that age can have, either boy girl. I had a very dear male friend at that age, or friendships among people of the same gender. That those bonds are incredibly important. And can be very powerful at that age as an influence, as a push to the truth and to the light. So Elizabeth is the light in Joshua's case. When I was writing Elizabeth, I love Elizabeth. I wish Elizabeth were real so I could be friends with her.
Right. And
she's awesome. She's so scrappy.
Yeah. And I'd like to point out that Elizabeth, just like Joshua, she's got her own issues. I mean, her particular situation is, if other people knew about it, the main reaction would be shame. I mean, what
Right.
happened to her? So they're
Right.
both
Sorry.
yeah, no, because they're both hurting inside, but they manage to help each other out.
Right. Well, Elizabeth has her deep, dark secret, which is that she's an unwed mother. I don't think I'm giving the plot away too much to put that out there. But she's not ashamed. The secret she's keeping is from the other kids, because she doesn't want to be ostracized at school. She sort of made a conscious decision. I'm not going there, it's not worth it in this snooty school filled with snooty Yankees, right? She's come from Alabama. She does not need this stuff.
Yeah.
But she and her mom are on the same page. This is not a disaster. This is a blessing. It just came in at a bad, at an inconvenient time.
Right.
But she has a whole backstory with how she got that baby that's very dark.
Yeah.
That's very, very dark.
Yeah.
And but she's a scrapper and a fighter, and that's a quality. Again, going back to me as the creator of these characters, that's a quality I didn't really have at that age. Now, I was never an unwed mother or anything like that. I was a high school nerd, thank God. So I was terrified of boys, and that would have prevented any high school pregnancy. But she was really put upon by people with a lot more power than she had, and by the time we meet her on the page, she's really angry. She's not blaming herself.
Right.
I was that age and I was put upon by people with a lot more power than myself. I felt that I deserved that treatment and carried that shame with me for a very long time. So I wanted Elizabeth to be sort of the person I wish I could have been at that age. But I do think a lot of young people, well, a lot of people of all ages, carry other people's shame or mistreatment.
Right.
Particularly again, if you grow up in a house with a lot of addiction, a lot of secrets, you know, kids are sponges, and they'll kind of soak up mom or dad or big brother or Uncle Joe's history, and it somehow becomes their fault, their burden.
Right.
And so, but Elizabeth doesn't do that. She's like, no, ma'am, not
Yeah.
me. You know, right? She's a fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I got, what for me, what permeates throughout this book, I mean, this is you mentioned I guess you mentioned this earlier in this interview. I mean, secrets and
Right.
fear as well. I mean, it takes a natural toll on human beings, and eventually it's going to come out. Whatever it is, it's going to come out.
Well, it often comes out in the worst case, it comes out in death. It comes out in suicide. It comes out in murder. I mean, when we have these evil secrets, it comes out globally, societally in you know, in sociologically sick societies where thousands, millions of people are murdered.
Right.
It comes out in gun violence. You know, our secrets keep us sick, both individually and in family units and in larger societal units. So when we lie to ourselves, when we can't see facts as facts, whether that be the fact that dad is an alcoholic, for example. My father was not, by the way. My father, who's still living and is 89 years old, just called me because he just got back from the Middle East. So anyway, at
Okay.
89, right? He's going strong. But you know, if dad is an alcoholic and screams at the kids and hits mom, and everyone says, oh, that's just dad being dad, and don't tell the neighbors. Yeah, that whole family is really sick from that, you know, and the kids are all going to grow up to be one way or another self-harming. It happens over and over and over again in our society. We have, you know, in America at least, I can't speak for other countries, there's such an enormous amount of addiction. Some of it legal addiction, like alcoholism, and some of it illegal, but it's all the same stuff. It's all secrets and lies, and that stuff just makes you so, you know, the secret, like, look, you know, we still have a secret in America. We're not a racist society. Really, we're not. You know, of
Right.
course we're
Right.
a racist society. Can we admit it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like the truth will set you free. The
Yeah.
truth will set you free.
Yeah.
Because you know, it's that simple. Just tell me the truth. Tell me the truth,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So anyway, I'm on a rant now, but
All right.
sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. Okay. So let's say you came across someone who's dealing with a really, really heavy secret, and it's starting to get to that person, him or her. You
Right.
don't know what it is, but you do have time to tell that person one thing about handling the his concern or her concern. What
Hmm.
would be that one thing you tell that person?
Tell the truth. Find a way to get to the truth. Just find a way to get to whatever the truth of the story is. Let it out. I mean, people do go to psychotherapy, therapists, you know. There's a reason there's so many of them. Um, it's a terrible story. This is just an awful story, but true story. I had a college friend of mine called me about a month ago. Somebody I've been in touch with all these years, and he said he had bad news, but um, another college friend who had been my boyfriend, who had been my great love in college, that this man, now in his early 60s, had committed suicide. My friend called to tell me this.
Right.
And I had lost touch with this man decades ago.
Right.
because you grow up, you leave college, you have a life.
Right.
And I thought of him from time to time
Mm,
and didn't really know anything about him. And our mutual friend would never say a word about him. So I thought, well, there's something going on. So I'm going to just not try to push too much.
right.
Anyway, so the mutual friend called me and told me he had bad news that this man, for the sake of the show, I'll just call him Joe. That Joe had committed suicide
Right.
in, I guess, sometime in late July, and then my friend Mitchell, I said, what happened? Fill me in the past 30 years. And Mitchell told me the story of increasing despair. And I was like, hadn't Joe ever, don't they believe in psychiatry in that
Right.
family? Right?
Right.
Like, I'm Jewish. My tribe, we go to therapists. The Joe was Catholic,
Mhm.
Irish Catholic family. I don't know. I mean, they were American. Um, and for many generations. So I don't know anything about what was going on there, but you get help. If you have cancer, you're treated by an expert, right? You go to an oncologist. You don't go to
Right.
the voodoo doctor. You don't do herbs and crystals, right?
Right.
You try to get help, but you go, the very first thing, you go to your priest, you go to your rabbi, you go to your neighbor, you go to your best friend, you get some loving help as a first step for anything. You don't isolate, but people in pain often their first instinct is to isolate. So
Right.
it's a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the last minute or so of this interview, Jennifer, are there any words of wisdom you'd like to share, maybe to inspire our listeners?
Words of wisdom. Oh golly. I need the words of wisdom. My words of wisdom would be um, that your power, whatever your power is given to you at birth by God. And whatever that power is, if it's or passion or intuition or instinct or uh, talent, however you want to posit it,
Mhm.
or like driving desire, like just if you can, not everybody can, you need to follow that special path, whatever it is that has been laid out to you at birth, and that's our journey our journey. I don't know if there's a next world or not. I hope there is, because there are a lot of people there. If
Right,
there are, I want to see, but you need to follow your path, whatever it is, and stick to it, and don't let anyone tell you you can't. Don't ever believe somebody who tells you you're not good enough to do whatever it is.
right,
That is, or it's not for you.
right,
The God inside, that's how I understand it, the inner voice, that's your guide,
mhm,
not all those voices out there.
right. Okay, got that. Well, great words of wisdom right there.
Uh, if you say so. My kids certainly don't listen to me.
Well, I'm sure you learned a thing or two in all the years that you've been alive.
Well, I've learned a thing or two by raising three children and
Right,
two dogs and one husband. So,
right. Okay, got that.
especially the husband part.
Right, okay. All right, cool. So, in closing, then, the book is The Book of Joshua. The author is Jennifer Ann Moses, and you can find her book on Amazon. So, Jennifer, wish we could talk longer, but we're a little short in time. So, thanks very much for being on Author Story. It's a real pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
All right, you're welcome. So, everyone, please check out The Book of Joshua by Jennifer Ann Moses, as well as subscribe to our channel if you wanna. So, catch you all on Author Story next time on our next interview.